Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coresight Conversations. We're here to discuss the future of retail with Alex Genov, Head of Customer Research at Zappos. Alex is a social psychologist. He brings a lot to the conversation. Alex, we're so happy to have you here. We're going to take a minute or two to get all the registrations and the attendees on, and then we'll open up the conversation. But for the moment, Alex, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marie. Thank you, Deborah, for having me. It's a great honor for me to be on this conversation. It's been a pleasure to interact with you, Marie, through the years now. And so, yeah, I'm Alex Genov. I head up customer research at Zappos. And my background is in experimental social psychology. And that's where I bring my knowledge and from methods and ways of understanding people. And I've been applying this knowledge and methods to the software industry for over 15 years now. I've had experience in different industries like the insurance industry, personal finance. I was with Intuit for 7 years. And then I've been with Zappos for almost 6 years now. And it's a pleasure to be here again. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Alex. We're really glad to have you here. We're looking forward to your insights. We have a lot of questions lined up. We'll give it another minute while we wait for our attendees. Okay, I think we're good to start. So Alex, just as a backdrop, retailers haven't really known their customers or nurtured their relationships with customers for decades. Many retailers haven't. You know, they have data in their hands, and yet they're not really using the data to understand the customer. Do you think that what we're going through with COVID right now could make a difference?
Absolutely, Marie. I think it's a very true statement that a lot of businesses in general, I would say, even great businesses rely on data, but very few businesses, and for example, Zappos is one of those exceptions, really have shown that they deeply care about their customers. And I think now with this crisis, it's highlighted the importance of this relationship with the customer, the importance of loyalty. And we use this term loyalty very loosely, and it's overused. But I think the true meaning of that lies in the examples of interpersonal relationships, for example, right? And I think our interpersonal relationships are tested in difficult times, and the same thing is happening now with businesses in general and with retailers in particular.
Great. I just want to advise the guests that have joined us here today that you have an opportunity to ask some questions, and we'll make sure that Alex gets to them during the course of this conversation. And also we'll be taking a poll. So the question is at the bottom, the question and answer at the bottom of the screen. Please look at that if you'd like to ask a question. And we're going to begin polling in about 5 minutes. So Alex, talk about digital technology. It promised to tell us so much about the consumer. Tell me, you know, look at it in terms of how it's fulfilled its promise and where there still is promise.
Absolutely, Marie. Technology has been changing so rapidly. Unlike our psychology, right? And that's the interesting contrast. Our psychology hasn't really changed for millennia, but technology has changed, methods have changed, and what we have now is unprecedented convenience, I would say, of shopping, ease of use of shopping, right? You can shop, you know, at all hours of the day. You can get an item from the other end of the world in a few days. You have access to incredible variety of products. You also, based on the use of data, and this is a unique aspect of technology where all of your behavior can be recorded, right? We have tremendous amounts of data. We have some, I would say, limited personalization. I would call it best guess recommendations that you have on a variety of websites and digital apps. And you also have probably more relevant advertising based on data. I have some, for example, Facebook and Instagram, and these are anecdotal, I would say, anecdotal examples from my own personal experience, but also from what others say. They talk about kind of how eerily targeted and relevant the advertising is there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's
Right.
because those applications track a lot of our behavior. But it's also the statement that of eeriness, right, alludes to the fact that there's some trust issues there, right? It's when we trust the business, right? The advertising doesn't feel like an advertising; it feels just like help, for example, right? So these are the areas where we have seen a really great promise. Where this technology in general, when it comes to retail, falls short, I would say, is there's a big opportunity for genuine personalization, and that's where you really know the person, you know the customer as a person, and you care about them as much as you care about your bottom line, essentially. Then another area is where the use of big data, which has tremendous potential, is used to essentially average human experiences. And I would say you cannot average human experience. People are not numbers, right? And there's a big dilemma and disconnect there. And usually when I deliver talks on behalf of Zappos, and when I introduce myself, I say that I'm married to a wonderful woman. We have 2.4 beautiful children, and usually this elicits a chuckle, but the point is there's no 2.4 people, and you cannot average human experience. And then thirdly, I would say that real customer loyalty is developed and is preserved through time, in time. So you need to know your customers longitudinally, not just as snapshots in time. So I think these are areas that really have a lot more potential than currently has been fulfilled.
I think you gave an example when we talked about averaging and coffee. Can you talk about that?
Sure. That's one of my favorite examples. It comes from a TED Talk by Malcolm Gladwell. It's called Happiness and Spaghetti Sauce. I would recommend it to anybody. And in that TED Talk, the protagonist is Howard Moskowitz, who is a psychophysicist, and who studied how people perceive different foods and beverages in terms of how pleasurable they are to them. So he's really a PhD in psychophysics, and he measured people's reaction to different tastes in terms of how much they like them. And that's one of his examples is if you measure the satisfaction with how coffee is served, you'll probably see a third of people in general that really like their coffee strong and dark black coffee, a third that like it really milky, and a third that like it in the middle. And his point was if you create the average coffee and you serve it to all three groups, they will equally hate it, right? And this is, I would say, you can take any aspect of human life, and you're gonna find maybe 2, 3, 4 different groups of people in terms of meaningful differences as in terms of how they experience things. And when you average it, you basically, everything washes out.
So we discussed hospitality. What do you think retailers can learn from hospitality?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Marie. I've used hospitality as a metaphor for great digital experiences for a while now. And one of my big inspirations is the restaurateur Danny Meyer. who wrote the book Setting the Table. And I really like one of his quotes, which is, hospitality is when something happens for you, not to you. So this is pretty profound, right? And I would say this encapsulates the whole idea of a great customer experience. You can see it's very easy to see that in the restaurant business and in hotels, right, where it's a very interpersonal experience. And I have a couple of examples. Through our research at Zappos, we found one of our best customers. It turns out it's this guy who lives in Vegas. He was the CMO for the Venetian, Robert Rippey, and he gave examples from his experience in the hospitality industry. And he told us about this boutique hotel somewhere, I think in Florida, that was really well known for loyal customers, and that the secret there was that the doorman really knew not only you, but knew your grandparents, right? And so it's this continuity that creates a deeply personal experience, deeply emotional experience. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say we've launched the poll, so please, guests, participate in the poll, and we'll discuss it as the conversation evolves. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's there's other examples of this kind of experience. There's a story of this restaurant, for example, where as guests would come in, the staff would observe them very carefully, and then they would tailor their offerings to the mood of the person. So maybe the person's looked a little bit down, they would bring them a free dessert or something, or if they were seemed preoccupied, they would leave them alone. And I think that's where you see this whole idea of things happening for you, not to you, is when somebody observes you, gets to know you, but then uses that knowledge to help you, not to profit from you, for example.
Right, and consumers are happy for retailers to make money too. It's just, consumers don't want to be sold to just to be sold to. Consumers want, they want retailers that are standing alongside them, helping them make better choices so that they can improve their lives.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. I mean, any business is in business to essentially, without profit, the business will not be in business.
Right.
But it's the matter of the balance between a focus on profit and growth and focus on taking care of your customers. And so to give an example, for example, Zappos, Tony Hsieh is famous for saying that, first of all, Zappos we're business over profit. And you can see that most clearly in our customer service, which is unprecedented. And this is something that they started soon after starting Zappos. And they got this email from a customer that was not happy with the delivery of her shoes. And back then they decided, okay, we're gonna do everything in our power to make this good by this person. And they went out of their way to rectify the situation, and they received an email, and this is, mind you, 18 years ago. And the subject line was, wow, back then, right? And from that point on, the company has been about serving customers. The customer service, you know, Zappos eats up a lot of profit to create this fantastic experience. There's essentially zero wait time, essentially, and nobody bounces you off to supervisors. The customer service members are empowered to refund you right on the spot and to do anything in their power to kind of fix if something is wrong. Mm-hmm. And then they go out of their way even to, when they have a personal conversation and they hear that something happened to that customer, when they finish the call, they would write a card and send flowers to that customer. And you can see that then these stories start spreading, and that creates your brand essentially.
So, and does that in turn help with loyalty, customer lifetime value, return customers?
Absolutely, exactly. And the Zappos customer service team is literally called the customer loyalty team,
Mm-hmm.
precisely because they create that sort of loyalty. This experience creates the loyalty, and the word of mouth too. Exactly. Yeah.
So like taking an environment like today where so many people are quarantined at home with little entertainment besides, you know, what's on the entertainment they can access on the internet or on TV, they may be shopping more. Is there a way that you could advise people to enhance and cultivate better loyalty and customer engagement during this time?
And I would say the ways of cultivating customer loyalty should be the same, right? In terms of whenever it happens.
Right.
Now it's even more important than before, considering how anxious people are about the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's combined with insights that we have from our own research that show that trust in retail, for example, is not great among US shoppers.
Right.
And we measure trust with a statement, retailers always have my best interest as a customer in mind. And in general, US shoppers disagree with that statement. And that's, again, based on a lot of those practices where the interest of the company really outweighs the interest of the customer. And again, it's all about balance. But I think, especially now, retailers should be very attuned to those feelings of customers and really try to balance this achieving the numbers with empathizing with their customers.
Great, thank you. I think we'll give you another minute with the polling. We've got a lot of people that have answered. I just want to give you one more minute and then we'll end the poll. So, and meanwhile, Alex and I will move on to the next question. You know, you've spoken about knowing people as people, not as shoppers or consumers. What does that mean in digital commerce, where you actually have such a record of people and shopping?
Exactly. So this came from, this notion came from one of my mentors, this Italian designer, Roberto Verganti,
Mm-hmm.
who spoke at one of the Intuit UX events years ago. And he spoke after Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit, talked about study the user, understand the user. And then Roberto comes on and says, you know what, if you want to really help people and do leapfrog innovation, forget about the user. And it was this kind of, you know, like the shock of this statement. But when I really understood what he meant, I realized that he was talking about understand the customer as a person holistically.
Mm-hmm.
Because the shopper is that person in the context of shopping on your website. Then this person may call your customer service line, then they're the caller, right? Or then they respond to your advertising and so on. But if you don't understand that that's the same person, and if you don't understand the context of their lives, when it relates to your domain, of course, then you're not going to really be able to help them, because a lot of it is, a lot of our behavior is driven by emotions. It's not just the practical and the pragmatic, right? It's when it comes, let's say, when it comes to shopping for shoes and clothes are very personal. They reflect on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to understand that. And I'll give you an example from one of our in-home visits. So speaking of different methods of understanding customers, you can use surveys, but you also need to combine them with really in-depth ways of understanding customers. So we visited this woman in San Francisco, and she used to be a model and then turned researcher, a really interesting woman. And she talked about, for example, some days when she feels a little down, she puts on a specific item, very kind of interesting clothing item, and then people start talking to her. And then that improves her mood. See, that was the insight. Before I was thinking you dress the way you feel. So if you feel down, you're gonna dress in all drab clothes, right? No, she turned it upside down. She said, I dress because I wanna change how I feel.
Right.
And that is an insight. And so where have you seen retailers, giving you such advice, right? Versus you just bought this piece of clothing, here's 10 more like this, take your pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you buy a bit more? And I think that's the difference between these attitudes.
Yeah, and also knowing people goes back to your point about longitudinal knowledge, right? It's not siloed.
This is the key, and I think, going back to psychology and how our knowledge of people has developed. Now, most of the stuff we know about people is really based on a few really long-term studies. For example, one study was called the nurses study. It took about 30 years. Can you imagine a cohort of people giving you answers for 30 years?
Right.
But that was the source of really in-depth knowledge and how things change. And again, when we go back to retail and developing loyalty, wouldn't it be great if you got to know somebody when they were, younger, maybe didn't have a lot of money, but they had, let's say, expensive taste as a person. That's more of a personal attitudinal thing. And then you did not discard them because they didn't have money then, but you catered to them in a way that you can. And then when they, with this first big paycheck, they're gonna go spend it on you, right? And then they maybe have a family, right? Now they're shopping for the whole family, right? And then their lives changes, and then with those changes, you understand how their attitudes change. So another example is, again, from our research is we studied families who have children, and one of the insights was that let's say these women who are really our best customers, before having kids, they would shop a lot for themselves, but then after having kids, everything was for the kid. Right? And then imagine then you can have two ways of communicating afterwards. Is if you really don't understand that, you'd say, you just bought something for a child, here, buy something for yourself too, right? Or you can say something like, you know what, we hear you, understand you feel mommy guilt, right? So maybe look around, put these things in your wish list maybe, right? And who knows, maybe from time to time on your birthday, we send you a gift, something to that effect. You can see how that will create a different attitude and will breed loyalty.
Well, right. It shows that you understand the person and you're developing a relationship. I want to address some of the poll results. It's when we asked the guests what consumers value, and they chose between value pricing, breadth of assortment, one-stop shopping, a sense of community, retailers and brands that stand for something, and free shipping. More than a quarter of the respondents replied what consumers value most is retailers and brands that stand for something. So, can you comment to that?
I think that's amazing. This is, I think it's great. I think it reflects just the current situation and how it's highlighted that new reality.
Right.
In general, if you poll customers, and that's one of the shortcomings of surveys is, it's self-report. So sometimes people cannot even express what they feel. So surveys should be used carefully. but usually you get the free shipping and the lower price. That's kind of when you average everything, right?
Right.
But then when you see how that changes when the context change, when our life changes, then the shift happens.
Right.
And I think then the retailers should be ready to do that. And so one example, for example, from Zappos is now, Zappos has started this new program. It's called Customer Service for Anything, which again, Tony has been saying we're a customer service company that happens to sell shoes. So now they're stepping up and saying, telling people, call us for anything. We'll help you with anything.
Right.
Which is exactly kind of represents what Zappos stands for.
It seems, as I think about retail over the last 100 years, that's a lot of what Nordstrom does.
Exactly. Oh yeah, exactly. This is, I mean, Nordstrom is a great example of customer service, and it's
Real
really
customer centricity, right?
customer centricity, great reputation, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they have gone beyond their own, like they have, quote unquote legends about the customer service that they do, where they'll take back tires,
Exactly.
totally outside of anything they sold, just to maintain and improve that customer relationship.
Exactly, and that's a fantastic example. I also use it when I give talks, but here's the point of this. I give it almost as a counterpoint to the whole segmentation approach, which is, I mean, it's a great story, Marie, but think about it, it's not really sustainable business. If people want to, right? But it would make a lot of sense if you really understood that customer had a tremendous potential for long lifetime customer value, and then word of mouth, a person who would like spread the word for you, then it makes sense, right? And that's why with companies having limited resources, it really makes sense to segment their customer base in a meaningful way. And then they say, with our limited resources, we're going to go above and beyond for these people, and we're going to maintain a level of excellence for everybody, right? We're not going to go below that level for everybody, but only for a certain group we'll go above and beyond. Because when you peanut butter, again, all your resources, then you're going to get the average coffee, essentially.
Right. The other thing that's interesting, I'm still going back to the poll questions, is following retailers and brands that stand for something is a sense of community. And then the things that really relate to shopping, they come in third, fourth, fifth, sixth place.
It's amazing. This is, I think that shows how times have changed. Right.
Yeah. The next question, interesting. I don't think this is a surprise. How do you think consumers will change from, COVID-19 and more online staple shopping? So that was 47%, big, almost half.
Yeah, that's absolutely understandable.
And then value, price, focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the whole point of value, that is, we keep talking about price, but I think it's the psychological equivalent of price is value. And this is what I think retailers should be focusing on, not price. Because price is it's a number, so it's easy to handle, but what's in consumers' heads and minds is value. Right. So, and that's again where segmenting based on these attitudes make more sense than just demographic segmentation or even behavioral segmentation. Is you can segment people along those very basic, I would say, maybe even personality traits to some extent, right? Attitudinal segments. So for example, there are people who would always go for the cheapest price, regardless of anything else, right? They don't care how much time it takes. They don't care about the ambiance. They would go, right. They want to find the lowest price. They don't care that then it's going to cost them to ship back and so on. But then you have people who say things like, I don't mind paying more money, but I need to know what I'm getting for it. And so, for example, Amazon Prime is a fantastic example of that, right? It's not cheap, but they keep packing the different value propositions in there, right? And
Right.
and so then you say, for that much money, I get the free shipping, I get free watch movies, I can listen to music. I mean, the list of value propositions goes on and on. And I think that is the key, is how you increase the perception of value. Again, not in ethical ways, right? Not in dishonest ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can charge more money, but then people, what you want your customers to say is, you know what, it was totally worth it. I would have paid more money for this.
Yesterday, I was listening to music via Alexa, and Alexa asked me, if you'd like, I can let you know when the next album by this person comes out. It's like that. So that's forward thinking. That's a
Sure.
relationship. That's being helpful.
Exactly. That's it. So Alexa knew that. I mean, and this is, it doesn't have, the algorithms don't have to be that complicated, right?
Right.
Listening to that artist, you must like that artist, right? It's not that complicated.
Right, I know, right. It's not that complicated. And what is surprising is that more retailers are not doing things like that, right?
So I mean, going back to your example of Nordstrom, it's easier to create that with an interpersonal personal visit, right? Because then a good salesperson, not just a salesperson, will read your mood and will help you and maybe get to know you.
Mm-hmm.
Online, it's not that it's not possible. It's a bit more challenging, but not a lot of retailers are even trying to emulate that.
Right. The third question on our poll was, what's the biggest irritant for online shoppers? And I know this is an irritant normally for online shoppers, but now when it's really the only choice, it's a big irritant. And so 1/3 of the respondents said lack of inventory.
Oh, right.
Right.
I mean, especially with now shortages in terms of pasta and flour, this.
Right.
Crazy.
And no one, lack of payment options was not selected by anyone. So.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, be in stock.
Right, exactly. And that may be, again, maybe driven with that now almost like panic mentality that things are running out.
Right.
I think that may be the case. Yeah, payment options, I mean, as I said at the beginning, the technology has advanced so much that now is, and really driven by Amazon, they've made it so easy to shop, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just one click essentially, right? So yeah, payment options, and there's companies now innovating in terms of breaking up your payments into into installments, let's say, or stuff like that that really caters maybe to younger people, and that goes to show, again, understanding of somebody's situation, right? You want something more expensive, you don't want to pay for it up front, maybe you have an installment plan.
Right. So talk about surveys. What does a good survey actually do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Marie. Surveys are, I mean, there's a lot of attitudes about surveys out there, that surveys are, crap, or you can't trust surveys. They're like any tool. Like if it's misused, it's not good, right? If you have to paint your walls using a screwdriver, you're going to have a tough time, right? But that's not a good reason to start bad-mouthing screwdrivers.
Right.
So polls are one of the tools in a toolbox for understanding customers, and I would say they're the only method currently to understand people's attitudes and these subjective experiences at scale. The only way, right? Because otherwise you can have interviews, you can have conversations, but how long is it going to take you to talk to 6,000 people? Imagine that, right? One after the other.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now we do surveys with 6,000 people, we can collect the data in 2 days, sometimes in 1 day. So I think that's it. This is the only way to at scale do that, but you need to really, it's not simple to do surveys, really good surveys. You need to ask questions that are not leading questions, and ask, really know what you're after. Sometimes it's not good to ask direct questions. You need to understand things indirectly and so on. So I would say when done properly, surveys are a really great tool, but they have to be combined with more qualitative understanding of people. So interviews, even home visits, you know, understanding the context. Sometimes retailers do these shop-alongs, which is along with shoppers in stores. You can do virtual shop-alongs nowadays with applications like Zoom or other. You know,
right.
have the person shop. I can ask you now to go and shop online and observe you and talk through your process. So yeah, that's you have many tools nowadays. And it's how you use them.
So are surveys actionable?
Surveys, I mean, in and of themselves are not actionable or non-actionable. It's the insights that you get out of them can be actionable. So if we talk about segmentation, for example, the easiest way is demographic segmentation. So you can have a very simple survey, ask people about their age, their income, right? And it's very simple, but it's absolutely not actionable, especially when it comes to retail, because what you're going to find out is you're going to spend a lot of money finding out that wealthy people spend more money. You know, that's a groundbreaking insight. You know what I mean? Or that younger people who right out of school, they don't have a lot of money. So that's not actionable. Another kind of pitfall of this approach is, let's say you segment people according to age, right? And then you put them into different buckets, and then you have different emails going to the different age groups, right? Well, one day maybe one day after your birthday, you can jump into a different group, right? Technically, but you're the same person, right? You haven't changed much. So I think that's the key, is to try to understand people and segment them along criteria and attributes that are longer lasting and that they're also actionable. So for example, with marketing and communication, I can give you an example from another company that I worked for. We did a segmentation of runners, for example, right? And you would think runners are runners, but in terms of their attitudes, you have people who run, one group of people runs to achieve goals, to overcome challenges, and to win races, right? And another group, completely different, and they're not overlapping at all, are people who run to look good, to be fit, and to be healthy. Right? And these two different groups of people, if you send an email to one group, to the fitness and health group, saying, win your next 5K, they're going to be like, what is this? This is not for me, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where the actionability comes in, is how you communicate to your customers.
So we have a lot of questions from the guests, and I'd like to ask them of you. So one question, wondering what you think is the best approach to balance a value with a mixed merchandising mix featuring higher cost items. So value and higher cost during the financial caution that we're seeing the US consumer deal with today.
Let me see if I understand the question. So is it about how you present more expensive items to customers in these times?
A mixed merchandise assortment spanning value to higher cost.
Oh, value meaning cheaper?
Value pricing, I think.
Oh, value pricing. Well, I think, it's right now is really important to do that, understanding that consumers now are concerned about their finances and that they feel general anxiety. They're going back to maybe like more of a savings mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's essential to meet that expectation and have lower priced items, for example. At the same time,
And yet you still want to have you still want to have that the indulgence, right?
right, exactly, and here's where the messaging comes in, right? And first of all, showing empathy, but then saying, you know
Mm-hmm.
what, but we understand that you want to treat yourself, right? So here, maybe save this for later. And nowadays, I mean, I mentioned that there are ways to let people pay in installments, for example, right?
Right.
And I mean, the layaway is, I think, a method in stores, but my sense is that it had this, it's almost like a bad name, you know. Layaway is something that you do if you cannot afford to pay something.
Right.
So that, I think now retailers can reverse that. If there's a stigma, I don't know if there is, but you can reverse that and pitch it in a positive way.
Well, so many of today's consumers are used to annuity payments in terms of their IT, their entertainment spend, that it becomes easier then to sell a good
Right.
on installments as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Another question that we have is, what's the value of machine learning, of a machine learning like recommendation engine, SKU recommender, and an NLP, an image recognition after COVID-19? So those are a lot of tech, like what's the value of all this technology?
Right. No, yeah, I understand that. I mean, I think there's tremendous potential in machine learning and natural language processing and image.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a lot of potential. I think that the question is how it's used, right? And we need to, that's my opinion, we need to supplement those algorithms with other data, right? We need to feed more qualitative data and more attitudinal data to make the algorithms better.
Mm-hmm.
The algorithms by themselves, they don't care about, right? They're just code, right? And it's up to us to infuse, like, my question is, with all this artificial intelligence, who's coding for artificial empathy? That's my question, right? Who's in charge of, and so, for example, we have a great group of data scientists at Zappos, brilliant people. And what we're trying to do is to work together and to supplement, and we really enjoy working together and collaborating to merge these sources of data. It's not very easy because everybody's so busy with their own field,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to make an extra effort to kind of try to merge those data streams.
And integrate it.
Yeah.
So you talked about attitude-based segmentation. How do you approach collecting customer data to do this? How do you get the attitude data on the customer?
Right. It's through surveys. So you do, we've done several of those now. We did one, for example, for luxury, one for the different mindsets, right?
Right.
So you need to do it with surveys, but you need to really carefully design the segmentation, or what's called the basis question.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to come from the strategy team, right? It's not so much a discovery thing. So in the case of Zappos, for example, we started with statements that were developed by Tony and the strategy team. What are customers valuing over and above just lower prices, right? So it was emotional connection with the retailer, high quality products, right? Personalized approach. And when we asked, you need to really carefully structure the question, but then you really find those groups of people, and there's a lot of complex math involved afterwards, and it's not my forte, but I've been lucky to work with really smart people that can do k-means clustering and all these difficult segmentation analyses, and then you find the groups that that are quite different from each other when it comes to these statements.
So one of the questions, this is a tough one. What will the future of retail look like immediately after the pandemic, and then 10 years from now?
Well, I'm still. I mean, I ordered my crystal ball from Amazon, but it's gonna take. It's gonna take. But it's not essential, so it's gonna take about 3 weeks. You know, I don't know. I mean, I usually don't like these predictions because who knows? I kind of even sometimes make fun with comments on LinkedIn precisely about, you know, the future of this, the future of that. You know, I don't know. I think it will be tied to there will be probably economic hardships. So in those times, people are more careful and more anxious. I mean, this is not like groundbreaking insights, right?
Right.
But I think this, for sure, more people will have turned to online shopping. And then those people, I think, because they're only used to stores, then I think retailers should really empathize with that and see how they can make the transition easier. Because these are probably people, you need to understand why you didn't shop online before, right? And if you had like security concerns, and a lot of these fears and anxieties are not rational, right? But you need to understand that, and then you need to message appropriately.
So one question is about Zappos. And so this is, what key things did Zappos, or is Zappos doing well during the pandemic? And what gaps has this pandemic exposed in your business? And what are you doing to improve that?
Yeah, I think it's what we're really doing is what's at the core of Zappos, which is customer service and this empathy towards our customers. So I think right away, I believe, for example, the marketing group quickly adjusted the cadence of emails, right, and just to be very sensitive to people and how they're feeling. We're starting this new program again, Zappos Customer Service for Anything.
Right.
We've always been involved in the community, so helping in the community with what we can. And in terms of gaps, I think that's probably in line with what a lot of retailers are facing now. In the supply chain is strained, right?
Right.
And whenever you rely on different services that are remote, let's say, and things shut down, then you're gonna experience difficulties.
Right.
But I think, you know, just my personal opinion is this is a good lesson to think about how much of services are outsourced, so to speak, or at remote locations versus at your location, and how much control just retailers have in general.
So one thing I want to ask before we end, and I want to let everyone know on the call that within the next 24 to 48 hours, this event will be placed on our website, and you, of course, will have access to it. How important is corporate culture?
It's tremendously important. I think it's, especially now, it may make or break things, right? Because the culture is essentially how your employees feel, how you treat your employees, how you treat your vendors, how you treat your customers. And culture is not a slogan. There's a right and wrong way of doing culture. The wrong way is the executive team goes on a nice retreat and they come back with a poster with 10 statements and they put them on the wall and say, memorize those, right? The right ways, and I think that's what Zappos did, was involve the whole company in crafting those culture statements and the culture principles. So we have 10 of them. And the first one is wow through service. And the last one is be humble, essentially. Be humble. And
Right.
those are, they're exemplified, they're put in practice every day through rituals, through investment. It's how you invest your money. And then for Zappos, it's basically huge investments in customer service and big investments in just everybody selecting the right people, first of all, to join the company, and then encouraging them to not only to work together, but to have fun together as well, right? And then really, really paying attention to your vendors. I mean, for example, our annual party is not called the employee party, it's called the vendor party, because it's basically acknowledging that without the vendors, we're not going to have a business.
Right. So I have another question. How do you feel experiential retail and human connection in a physical environment will change post-COVID, if it does at all?
I don't know how much it's going to change. I think once people start going back to the stores, things are going to be back to normal, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think smart retailers will, even without the crisis, they're already thinking about the atmosphere. For example, I heard at a conference, the woman who heads up the retail spaces for Nordstrom talk about how they create spaces and they take care of light, they take care of the quality of the air.
Right.
This to me is caring for your customers, right? Understanding that that's what matters, and that's not only customers but also employees. So I think this should be happening in general. Hopefully it's going to be happening more now.
And I have one question here. Lots of questions came in the last 3 minutes. Do you think how do you think customers will feel about trying clothes on in stores?
Again, I don't know. From our research, I think there's different. We've discovered this need for better experiences trying clothes on, and I've heard anecdotal, really complaints of spaces in stores that are not very pleasant, right? The light and just the general atmosphere. That's why a lot of people prefer to try clothes on at home. Just get the clothes, try them, return them if it doesn't work out. But again, that can prompt physical store retailers to think about that. Ask your customers how it felt to use your fitting room, and then make changes to change that.
Right. And there's 2 questions here about the role of advertising, and do you see it diminishing? Do you see the social media becoming more important or advertising becoming less important? What's your sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have data on that.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen reports online about traditional advertising kind of going down and
Right.
social media advertising going up. I mean, as more people go online and start using social media more, that makes a lot of sense. But again, I don't know actual numbers of how fewer people watch TV versus go more on Instagram, let's say.
So here's a comment and a question. I've read that Walmart has done well with the transition to more online shopping for its customers, more than other grocery retailers. Do you see this? They'd appreciate any insights into food shopping changes. Because many of us are trying to shop for food online.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and again, I mean, I cannot necessarily comment on Walmart, but
Mm-hmm.
this crisis showed the need for a model where we need to get our food delivered, right?
Right.
And you hear things like, I mean, you wonder why there's shortages now of staples. I read something recently that it's this the supply chain is so inflexible. I read that farmers are throwing away eggs and milk, you know, just because they cannot get it to the stores. They used to get it to the restaurants.
Right.
So you wonder, like, how is that possible nowadays?
Right. Yeah, it's food shopping has changed. I've read that, you know, the amount of food that was distributed to the restaurants and to the fast food and that's diminished. And where is it going now? So in New York, they have food kitchens and they're feeding the poor. I think maybe they're doing something like that in San Antonio too. But the food supply chain, it's different than the apparel supply chain. Shorter.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I see a comment there, Marie, that we need to wrap up. I think it's in the text. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then, thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you be a part of our Coresight Conversations in the Future of Retail. And anyone who's on the call, we will have access to the recording within 24 to 48 hours. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.